Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Big Data Days 2024. It's time for one of the most exciting sessions of the whole day, which is our panel discussion. Always an event that I'm very much looking forward to. Today, I have with me on this session three esteemed panelists. Unfortunately, Ashutosh was unable to make it, but we are going to proceed with three anyway. We're going to be talking about AI-powered digital transformation, which I think is a topic that is on everyone's mind today. And throughout all the sessions that we've been seeing so far, this is a theme that is coming back in a variety of different technologies, practices, and ways in which organizations transform. I'm going to get started with a quick introduction of the panel that we have with us today. And I'd like to start with MJ. Could you do a brief introduction of yourself?
Thanks very much, John. Yes, hi, I'm MJ. I'm a data and AI director at Playtime Solutions. So we're a premier data and AI partner here in Australia by Microsoft. We work primarily with data and AI space, in particular with government sectors and with the team around the digital transformation about where is this all going into? What are the risk considerations that these organizations have to think of? And other than that, I'm also a Microsoft MVP and an O'Reilly author.
Great. So both an author as well as a Microsoft MVP. So let's right away then dive to Microsoft directly. I'd like to ask Valeria to introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Jen. First of all, thank you everyone for participating and attending our session today. It's a big pleasure and my pleasure to be here. So my name is Valeria Saravic. I work for Microsoft as a technology strategist, where I leverage emerging tech like cloud, AI, large language models, intelligent automation, and big data to drive digital transformation across our clients. Before joining Microsoft, I spent a decade at PricewaterhouseCoopers as the digital transformation lead, where I focused specifically on a large project to deliver digital transformation and efficiency to our clients as well. In addition to that, I have a PhD from the University of Auckland, New Zealand, where I specifically focus on human decision-making, responsible AI practices, and how AI impacts human well-being. I've been around the globe. I work in New Zealand, Australia, Europe, Asia, and now I'm actually in the US. So I'm extremely excited about this session and looking forward to it.
Good. Thank you so much, Valeria, for that great introduction. I'm super excited to have you on the panel with me today. And then last but not least, Kate.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, I'm really privileged to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be on this panel and speak, and also learn from all the amazing people that we have and the questions from the audience. So I've been in financial services for about 25 years, delivering transformation, both what would have been previously referred to as e-commerce and digital transformation per se. I think everyone drops the digital these days and just talks about transformation, and very much driving it from a data-led perspective and value-led perspective the whole way through. So working with banks like Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, Lloyds Banking Group, and also more recently Macquarie Asset Management, looking at the private market space and how to really bring that into the 20th/21st century. I do say 20th on purpose. And really all of the things that I've been working on about how do we seamlessly blend the human capability, the human nuance, and critical thinking that we can bring to both data, AI, and all the other wonderful tools that are available to us these days and beyond.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kate, for that introduction. And I fully agree with you. The human and critical thinking parts are going to be an extremely important aspect that we're also going to discuss in detail in this panel today. Before I'm diving right into it, with the first questions, I'd like to remind the audience that you can engage with the panelists today. So if you have any questions for any of the panelists specifically or just in general, please feel free to use the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. I will be moderating that after we've been going through the first few questions. I've seen a very active audience in the last few hours, so please keep the questions going so you can engage directly with the team that's right here today. Now, we're going to kick off. I've chosen the title AI-Powered Digital Transformation and Navigating the Landscape of Enterprise Big Data, because I think it combines a lot of the challenges and parts that any organization is busy with. Now, the topic of digital transformation has been around for, I would say, close to a decade. Organizations have been busy with that for quite a long time. So my main question to kickstart our discussion with is, AI has obviously has a significant, if not all-encompassing impact on digital transformation. Is this the moment that we've been waiting for? Is this how we're going to be leveraging digital transformation? And maybe I would like to start with Kate, the last to introduce, but the first to pick, and then I will move to Valeria and then back to MJ.
Sure, thanks, Jan. I think from my perspective, it's another step on the road. AI is that next level. We've had people using pivot tables and Excel spreadsheets that meant that you needed a very discrete set of data and you needed to know the question that you were wanting to answer around your data set. We've then had broader databases, and I think you touched earlier on sort of data and synthetic data that allows us to draw more meaningful pieces. And as we move forward into AI and machine learning, I think the biggest step change is just going to be the expanse of data, the breadth and the depth of the information that we can query incredibly quickly, overlaying that with all sorts of elements and imagery that allows us to very quickly get to some questions that we didn't even know we needed to answer, or even think about potentially when we're looking at operating models or business models. I think from my perspective, though, one of the things that I've seen is, while I 100% believe that data-driven insights and data-backed inquiries are critical to how we move our businesses forward, often what gets forgotten through that step change are the business processes that enable people to engage with either the inputs, the outputs, or the data itself, where those aren't necessarily moved forward at the same time as the AI tools are creating that revolution.
Absolutely. And I really like what you're saying in the sense that it requires us to answer questions which we probably didn't even know we needed to answer. Now, in order to kind of see that perspective, Valeria, you're working with one of the companies which I think it's safe to say you're at the forefront of this whole revolution. What's your thoughts on the way in which AI is moving this towards digital transformation, or is this the end point?
Something I want to add, I think the digital transformation actually was initially in place, and that's forced AI to move it further, because the digital transformation and big data was the foundation for AI to be born as such, as I can see it from the corporate world, right? Because when we started automating the processes, that's where we start coming out with all the smart machine learning algorithm to actually make it more operational efficiency. So what I can see that it's becoming embedded into our organizational life, right? There is no point like we're studying digital transformation or we continue in digital transformation. It's ongoing, right? It's evolving. It's the same as how we as a human beings now evolve with the technologies, the same what's happening within the organizations. What we can see in comparison to what was before is just a better decision making, right? It's a more real-time data. It's better data analytics tools. Is because we have more data now, we can process the data, so we are evolving, and it's changing not only the processes, but it's also changing people and how people make the decision and how people use the technology. So I think it's a kind of like it's a normal evolution that we're going through, and all of the components becoming the part of the process, and you can see how it's all getting involved. So that's kind of my vision, because I saw how it started at the beginning when we started just automating the processes. And now I can see how those people who just started automating the processes, they're writing the machine learning models, and all the technology is becoming more easily available. And all of the people is now seeking for those companies that are already digitally advanced.
Absolutely. So we're specifically also going to talk about that people aspect in a second. But before I do that, I also would like to pick the brain of MJ for a second.
All right. Okay, so I'll put it in a mindset of a technologist, right? AI or without AI. The thing is, because I've been following this, hype trail for a while now. When mobile computing came to be, when cloud computing came to be, with blockchain came to be, and so on and so forth with this one. I think there are three things I want to emphasize here. What AI is doing at the moment in terms of digital transformation is that it's actually opening the eyes of these organizations we're in. Now it's time to look back at our businesses. What is our core business? Besides setting up a website, creating a mobile app, doing SEO, and all this, IT jargons out there. What is our business? And can AI replace our business? So that's one lens to look at it. Like that's how it's all shaking it up. Second is that, how can we actually use AI to enhance our business? Again, it's kind of like following from that wake up call of like being disrupted or being a disruptor. And lastly, I think, I agree that this is just a checkpoint. This is not the end, because there's so many questions. There's still so many problems out there that needs to be solved. It's just that we're now solving much more relevant problems these days. Again, instead of like choosing between React or Angular or technology this, technology that, we're now again much more focused and much more again, the allocation of resources are much more aligned to what problems are you really solving. So I think I want to put it in that regards, like my point of view of AI and digital transformation.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great point of view to keep in the back of our minds. I want to do one more question just to kind of inspire the audience a little bit, and then I'm gonna. I already see questions dripping in real quick in the first few minutes already. So, and then I'm gonna moderate some of the questions. And the next question I'd like to lead with is, in your professional opinion, what do you think could be a groundbreaking or most promising AI technology? And that can be obviously business related, but you could also say, this is such a cool feature that I've seen in the last few months. This could really change the world. And let me start in this case with Valeria, and then I'll go back to MJ and then to Kate. Valeria, what's your thoughts, obviously besides the Microsoft products?
No, I'm not even bringing Microsoft. I'm actually bringing everything from theory and experience, right? Because Microsoft has its own machine, right? But if you think about AI technology, honestly, nothing much changed. It's just evolved, right? We have the machine learning, we have NLP, we have RPA, we have AI enhanced analytics and reinforced learning, and even the new GPT-4 that came out from yesterday, right? And everyone is excited and hyped about, right? It's a combination of tools. So there is no such a one technology that will dominate, right? The only thing that is different now, they are more advanced because we have more data. We can process data faster. We have better technology. We have better skills, better AI. So I would not select and say that ML for me is better than NLP. No, I would say that in combination of those tools, we are getting stronger and better. But there are, of course, different names of the products that you can use that can benefit your organization based on your use case. That's a different question.
Question. Yeah. I think that's a very interesting perspective to kind of not differentiate, but to kind of put it on a generic approach of just saying this is AI tools for different kinds of cases. MJ, do you share that perspective?
Yes, of course. And again, it's very hard to share just one singular perspective about this, right? Do you go general? Do you go specific? I think my general thinking is that, the exciting part is that how, things that are taking 8 hours, 20 hours to do, now you can just do them in 2 hours, right? Like an example I recently worked on is like a legal firm wherein like it took them like two weeks just to code up a very complicated legal case. Now it's just taking them 2 to 3 days. So that's really exciting, right? Then the other aspect that I'm really fascinated of is the concept of AI on edge. Like I've been always fascinated on that. Like obviously there's cloud and the power of cloud, but what if there's a remote village out there? How can they leverage AI, right? So a lot of those, existing use cases that you can just think of that's outside of the metropolitan area. So yeah.
Correct. So in different parts, I think that's a very interesting part that could definitely benefit from AI in a even a much broader scope than maybe some of the more corporate use cases. Good. Kate, what's your thoughts?
Sure. So I would touch on a couple of things that Valeria mentioned and MJ. So Valeria touched on NLP. And I think for me, that's super exciting in terms of opening up the ability to engage with AI to the citizen computer scientist, the citizen developer, where you have hopefully controlled and governed sets of data with appropriate permissioning and authentication over the top that really allows people to query and support their own directions of investigation on the fly in the time and way in which they need that to be done without having to wait or get in a queue of other people to do it. So again, accelerating that piece. And also, I think on one of your previous session earlier, you were talking about being able to have that more conversational based thing, which is also going to bring in maybe people who've got arthritis and can't use keyboards, or just the broader access that you're enabling. You're removing some of those barriers to really engage with both the processes to be made more fluid as well as the technology that's enabling them. And then you bring in the things like sort of overlay that with deep learning that's happening around, you show a system a puzzle once and it's going to be able to do, much the same as a human. It's going to learn and grow and adapt and be able to do things without constantly being spoon-fed or having to know what the question is, etc. And then federated learning, where we have that sort of more natural sharing ecosystems, communities of knowledge that can be built upon, and each device being seen as a person in that digital community, sharing their data, and everybody and every device steps up together. Bring in edge computing, which MJ mentioned, and you've got your mini brain right where you need it, exactly where you want it. So again, all of that processing becomes much quicker, and the thinking becomes closer to the action of what you're trying to do. And I think as part of that, it's a very natural step that all of the sort of responsible AI and looking at things from an ethical perspective is only going to gain even more momentum, and potentially, teaching AI to be the good corporate citizen itself without needing to have too many guardrails over the top, and still applying that critical thinking that says, hang on a second, this looks like a hallucination, or that makes absolutely no sense in terms of an answer. Let's dig into it more deeply. And really using these tools, remembering that they're tools and they're not just something that we can abdicate any and all responsibility for our own thinking and our own perception of how things are.
Absolutely. So especially the part that you mentioned in the sense that we're creating this kind of mini brain artificially that subsequently can be used, and that we might even want to teach to behave ethically itself. I think that's going to be one of the key challenges that every organization and human might be faced.
As long as we don't end up with Hal from 2000, where he gets rid of all the humans because the humans are going to kill the humans, then that's good.
Yeah. And Kate, I love your response.
Absolutely.
I think it's actually, you went a bit more in details, and it's really nice, because I remember myself a couple of years ago, I was so fascinated about personal assistants, and I was waiting for those technology to come out, and I'm still waiting, and I just remember, and I was like, where's my personal assistant? So that's a really good point. And another one that you add is responsibility. Responsibility is still on human beings, and quite often we forget about it, right? We start using those technologies, we never check we don't understand where the data came from, we don't understand how the data is used, and we don't understand how it actually impacts our decision-making process. So that's later on, maybe we can discuss and touch base, because it's a component of our life that we need to take care of and we need to be responsible for.
Yeah, financial services, you've always got the threat of prison in the back of your head whenever you're thinking about whatever your data lineage is, or the evidence of your thinking at each time, so you can explain it in 7 years' time.
Absolutely, and I think the ethical part and the decision making and the validation and maybe the Jill in the back of your mind, that's going to be an interesting part. I'm quite sure we're going to touch upon some of those ethical considerations in a minute. While we've been talking, I've seen a lot of questions already coming in. So if it's okay with the panel, I would like to already kind of shift to some of the questions from the audience, because that's obviously why we're doing all of this live. And I'm going to start with the most upvoted question that we have so far, which I'm going to project on the screen for everyone. And maybe I would like to ask MJ to start with this first as an answer to this question. The question is coming from Swaminathan Rayamanikam, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and if I don't, please excuse me. And the question is, I strongly feel that the data literacy followed by AI literacy are the two basic steps or starting points for any data-related transformation. Am I correct, as I don't see this happening in Asia Pacific widely? What are your views on this observation? Let's start with MJ, and then see who else would like to
I have a lot of opinions on this, and he mentioned about Asia Pacific. That's where I came from, and I think partially it's correct, right? There are a lot of organizations out there that a lot of these initiatives with data still falls under the whole IT initiative. There's nothing wrong about that. It's just that some organizations haven't had a solid strategy yet about their data. In terms of like having, either a CDO or a data team or things like that. Most of the time, other companies are still falling into that bracket of this is an IT capability. I think that's one, obvious thing I would like to point out. Second is that, some organizations, the reason why that's happening is that they're having a hard time to justify the cost for these initiatives. Like, what's the return of investment? What's the monetary value involved and things like that. So a lot of my engagement, especially with government, is that we always look at value add, and it's always a hard thing to kind of like sell that, because it's not very tangible. Like, hey, here's an app tomorrow, you'll have the app, or here's an app in 3 weeks time or something. But that strategy and like that kind of like takes time. And again, that's one of the challenges I see as well. But then again, right, it's an ongoing challenge. That's why the whole data literacy, AI literacy come into play. And there's also a lot of opportunities out there that, maybe in those IT-focused companies, they, work with partners, or they kind of like go into that consumption route of models from, trusted companies.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that. Valeria, you also lived for a few years in Asia Pacific, actually quite close to where I am. Do you also feel that data literacy, AI literacy are the startings or the stepping blocks or the first things to look at? Or are there other things?
I would also highlight that it's does not necessarily mean it's not only exists in Asia Pacific, right? The data literacy and AI literacy is across many organizations, across many industries, and across many, like, all geographical areas. It's probably pain points that everyone is going through. And I think I would actually probably even highlight the data literacy is much more than AI literacy, because everyone is so excited in AI and everyone is jumping on AI, and there are seems to be lots of resources and people available on AI space. However, the data literacy, and this is the foundation, right? This is the foundation that started like 10, 15 years ago. And that's probably, I can say it's a mess. It's still a mess in most of the organization. Doesn't matter how big or small they are. So it exists. It's a big problem. It's a chaotic problem. And also to add to MJ point in terms of whether it's a business or IT initiatives, it's always been organizational, probably drama to fight what is the cost center, what is not a cost center, shall we be investing it or not? And it's also extremely difficult to show the value, because how can you show the value when you just clean up your data sets and you kind of do the proper filtering on that? So I think it's a problem that have to be addressed in a strategic level, and it's not necessarily have to be justified in terms of the value delivered at that right moment. The value will be delivered as a combined value in the later on implementation stages.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. Kate, I'd like to move to you for a second, and I'd also like you to kind of share your thoughts on the data literacy, AI literacy part as a stepping stone. But also, I'm going to combine this with one of the other questions that I see in the chat is how, because we have so many, how would it then be possible for organizations to kind of come towards a more return on investment? Because Valeria just mentioned that it's very difficult to measure that. Are there ways in which we could do that? And if I'm listening right now and I would say, where do I start? Do you have any practical advice?
Absolutely. So I'll start with the KPIs and around ROI, since that seems to be the meat of sort of the next bit, because foundationally I agree that yes, data literacy, AI literacy is absolutely the cornerstone of how you deliver everything that you're trying to do, and it is a struggle for everyone, but I can come back to that. In terms of ROI, I think it's one of those things that you need to be a little bit creative about how you are supporting those people who hold the budgets, who are your senior stakeholders, who are your champions for the work that you're trying to do, and how you give them KPIs that enable them to participate and keep their budget open for you to do that. So one of the examples that I would cite is when Steve Gattenberg, who set up Barclays Rise, was looking to engage more inherently with fintechs and understand how those partnerships and that ecosystem could move the Bank of Barclays forward faster, etc., be more aligned with emerging technologies as well as emerging applications. One of the things he didn't do was say, my KPI is how many fintechs have we spoken to? My KPI is how many new technologies have I delivered into production? Which would have been a very natural kind of discussion to have in terms of, well, I'm setting up an accelerator, an incubator, I'm going to be speaking to all these fintechs about all these new technologies. He thought a little bit more broadly that said, you know, we don't know, the more VUCA your environment is, how uncertain it is, the more difficult it is to create those KPIs that enable the long-term engagement. So what he said was, I'm going to set up a space that's going to enable me to increase the number of business banking accounts that we acquire. And so for every fintech he had a conversation with that came through that first lab, part of the criteria of being involved in the lab was to take out a business banking account with Barclays. So he went to the sponsor and said, give me 100, give me 100 grand. And I'm plucking a number from there just for the point of the example. And I will give you a 4 times return on investment for the activity that I'm doing. Now, as a by the by, obviously, he was then engaging with these technologies. He was accelerating discovery and understanding of the problems to be solved using those new technologies. But there's absolutely not the KPI and ROI metric that he started with, because it would have been dead in the water before he even started. By the end of year 1, he would have spent 100,000 and he would not have put anything into production. He might not have even engaged with the technologies that were going to help Barclays accelerate their operating model, accelerate their competitiveness, their growth, whatever it might be that ultimately they were doing that activity for. So I would invite everyone to get a little bit creative about the KPIs and the ROIs that they're thinking of when they're engaging with these different technologies. And it may just not be the most obvious thing that you would otherwise be doing if that engagement was quite mature and further on down the line. And obviously, as we all know, while you can have your OKR, your vision statement about what your objective and key result might be, your KPIs can and should be changing as you move down that path towards your objective. So actually, by starting with something a little left field, but you know that you can deliver on, that then enables people to get excited, enables people to keep giving you budget, you can move those KPIs to be those more mature and sort of more expected KPIs as you go through that program and that body of work. And chances are, if you're enabling the one stakeholder that put his short arms in his deep pockets, or her short arms in her deep pockets, other people are going to get excited about the fact that you're smashing these targets out of the water, and more people are going to want to engage and also have that halo effect as you move forward. Now, I don't know if that's what other people have tried, but it definitely works. And invariably, I'm always going to think about things slightly left field. So it works for me in the way that I approach things as well.
Well, I think that's very good advice, especially also to take a bit of time. It is a bit of a learning curve, and I like your approach on taking this slightly more creative in terms of how you're going to measure this. Good. I think that was quite enough of a detailed answer on ROI. So I'm going to move to our next question. And let's go to the one, I see a lot of upvotes for this. So I think this is a question that a lot of people would like to get an answer to. So I'm going to start with Valeria, and then I'm going to move to MJ for your thoughts on this. The question is coming from Angel Vikramasinghe. And again, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. And this is a kind of like a vision question. From your experience, how far do you think AI can take us with digital transformation? What is the future going to look like? So it's a little bit of a crystal ball, but where are we going to be 5 years or 10 years from now?
That's an interesting question. I mean, we definitely will advance, right? But I want to bring a bit of a different angle to that point. We think about how AI advances us, but we also have to think how AI is actually dividing our society as well. Also, don't forget, we are here are the population that have access to the internet, have access to the smart technology, have access to the AI, but we still have 36% of the population who does not have an access to AI and even to the internet. So we also have to understand that AI will bring the gap of those highly educated and not so much educated, and those the one that in a disadvantage will have a higher gap to catch up with those in advantage. So AI will definitely take us further, and I think some of the unrealistic movies that we used to see in the 90s will come in reality, right? Hopefully, I'm still waiting for my personal assistant, but I would love to people start thinking is actually on the usage of AI to bridging the gap between the societies, because also don't forget AI brought some positive and negative things as well in terms of our real life became more expensive, right? We cannot afford real life engagement as much as we used to afford it before. Yes, it brings lots of benefits, right? Online education, but those who have extra income, they actually still go for their non-online education, non-online interaction. So I would actually try to think from this perspective in terms of how can AI bridge the gap and how can we bring a bit of more maybe humanity into our operation as well. But that's my point of view. But to answer the question, I don't know how to. I honestly don't know what the future is going to look like. I know we will have more tools. I know we will be more digital. I know we will lose some of our cognitive thinking abilities, right? Because I don't know about you, but I cannot calculate now in my head. I use only GPS all the time. I use all the chat GPTs to answer all the questions and partially write the emails. I will not lie about it. So that's something we're going to lose for sure, but it's up to us to decide what do we want to leave with us in terms of our human values, and what do we want to outsource. So maybe writing emails, it's something we all will be outsourcing, because again, this is does not bring us value. This is the KPI that does not important for us anymore.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to park your point around that gap that is growing, and also the ethical part, because I think I see a lot of questions in our discussion also that are touching upon that. But before I'm going to dive into that debate, and I'm quite sure we can easily fill another hour on that, I would first like to move to MJ to kind of also look at that crystal ball to see what your vision of the future and what it's going to be.
Okay, I think the short-term, version of what the crystal ball is saying is that there will be a lot of these much more industrialized or like specific, AI use cases that will be very fascinating to see. And because again, solve a lot of those foundational problems already about creating a model, so on and so forth. Like, I think those are, like there will be a lot of those AI for legal, AI for this, AI for that, and I think that's coming very, very soon. And if they're already in here already, but kind of like a bit further in the future, the way I'm seeing it as well is that we'll be much more compensated with the way we become much more creative or how we interact with things. Like we're now going to be valued monetarily based on the value we provide to the society, rather than the hours that we're putting in, because the hours who are doing the hours are now the AI and the bots and the agents and stuff like that. They'll be the one doing the hours. Now it's about people providing the value, and these specific individuals, hopefully to add up to Valeria's point, hopefully it works for the good and responsible AI around us.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to right away make that bridge a little bit towards the responsible or ethical AI, because that's obviously a topic of high debate. And I'd like to illustrate that with a bit of I would say a real life example. And I'm quite sure that one of that you've all seen this, and this was one of the movies, I think it was early 1990s, early 2000s, which was Minority Report. And that was the movie in which we first saw AI, and I don't know if of all of you've seen it, but basically robots predicting, is crime possible or not, and can we prevent crime before it's even happening? Now, in literally the hour before this, we had a speaker that showcased a model, was still reactive on analyzing all of the transactions in a country, in this case Kazakhstan, from public procurement, and based on that, he could quite adequately predict where there's cheating, where there is any kind of, I would say, not so ethical behavior. So my question in this regard, and let's start with Kate, how are we as a society going to deal with this ethical, very thin line between what is good for society and where does it become infraction on personal and civil rights?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think the Minority Reports and the iRobot type scenarios where people's lives are torn apart opens up all sorts of questions around increased vulnerability, that if we're going to lean back and say the computer is the de facto answer, and we see this in Asia a little bit in terms of social credit ratings, that says, we've been scanning these different things and we've decided that you are a risk to the government or political enemy, whatever it might be, for an interpretation or a nuance or something that maybe you said in a fit of pique that in the 1970s and 80s, thank God, maybe was never recorded. We bump into sort of cancel cultures, and we bump into, but you said this one thing 20 years ago, so we're now going to negate any and every value that you have as a human being or opportunity to offer. So I think there's not only exploitation on a personal individual level, a financial level, there are so many potholes that we can fall into by over embracing the fact that this thing is coming and it's going to give us so many benefits. Again, if you're sitting in internet poverty, and you don't have the literacy, whether it's a verbal, language, computer, anything literacy to engage with it, you know, your ability to actually thrive, let alone survive, becomes really tenuous. So it behoves us all, I think, to be thinking very clearly about where we are emphasizing a reliance or a deeper engagement with these different tools, and where potentially where we choose to apply them, we are expanding or exacerbating existing inequalities or barriers that we can't even solve in a manual world, in a non-digital world, you know, where you come back to food or housing or micropayments to the homeless, all of that kind of stuff. There are any number of unintended consequences that I think, while they shouldn't prevent everyone moving forward and exploring and investigating, they need to be held very central to everyone when we're thinking about, okay, well, how does this go wrong? What are the callbacks? How does this fail when it's going forward in terms of our broader societal footprint?
Absolutely, I fully 100% agree with what you're saying, and that's going to be a challenge that AI is going to bring us, maybe even more than that we have been used to in the past. I'd like to build upon that question and move to Valeria for a second. You already mentioned the growing gap. Maybe I'm going to call it the growing gap in terms of data literacy between different organizations and individuals as well. But what is the role, especially of organizations in that? You obviously work for a company that has a major footprint in this area. Can we just rely on government to help us out here, or is this a broader question?
From my personal perspective, right, no, we can't just rely on the government and big organization to make the changes, right? Because don't forget, no matter what, all the big organization and all of the government is machines, right, that needs to make money. No matter what, it's the primary focus. So but the responsibility is actually on us, right? When we talk about the job displacement aspect as well, right, everyone is getting concerned. Yes, the organizations can kind of support and help us, right? Because it's in their advantage to make sure that their employees are interested to work for them, and they have a certain innovative environment where they can create and bring the value back to them. That's one aspect. But from our personal growth, right, we have to understand that we also in some sort of game, right? And the faster we start adopting those technology, using those technology, the more advantage we're going to have. So we cannot wait for the government or for the organization to subsidize some of the programs for us. We have to self-educate and self-train ourselves. In terms of the ethical guidelines that coming from the government and that the ethical guidelines that organizations start to follow, I believe that all human beings want to behave in the best way, but it's not always possible. And it's not always possible from the organizational perspective as well, but they will. But the thing is, I also get a bit sometimes confused because it's really difficult to understand now the ethical guidelines, and they are quite complex. So for normal human beings, it's also such a it's overwhelming process to go through this ethical guidelines. I think we will have a different type of jobs that is going to come up that is going to specifically just helping us to explain what is allowed and what is not allowed. But I still think it's a self-responsibilities to know how the tools are working, how the tools using your data, and how the tools might potentially influence your way of living, your decision-making, the same within organizational life and outside of the organizational life.
I think that's a great summary, because it's really ultimately still a tool, but with that tool comes more and more responsibility. Now, I could talk easily for another hour, but I already need to go towards our last question. And for that, I would like to kind of go one more time round. This conference, Big Data Days, is all about knowledge sharing. And we have people who are very eager to learn here and that dedicate their time, no matter where they are, all over the world to help with this. And therefore, my last question is one that I also see here, and I'm going to kind of combine that with one of the other questions that I saw. Is this question says, what is the most critical skill set needed for individuals working in AI? So I think that's important, and very closely related to that question is the question that I'm also projecting on the screen right now. Is the one from Anisha. So kindly share some career tips for data scientists and people who are in the AI. So there's obviously a lot of demand for learning more and where to start. So maybe let me start with MJ. Please keep it brief. But what are some of the tips that you could give?
I think it's not about just having a skill. I think if I can impart this to everyone around listening, it's about having a mindset. And you probably heard it to a lot of different people, but having that growth mindset, forever learning never stops. There's always something new to learn. That kind of like learn it all mentality is just something that's going to really safeguard you in this journey, because again, there will always be new tools out there, new approach, new technology, things that I was talking about a year ago about LangChain and stuff like that. We're not talking about different things again these days. So I think it's about that. If you can think of it like your health or fitness, like not because you did pull-ups yesterday, that would be enough for the rest of the year. So kind of like just make sure you do enough, but also don't exhaust yourself too much on a daily basis. I think that's just one way to put it. Try your best to learn as much as you can.
Try as much, or your best to learn as much as you can. I think that's some great closing words, MJ. Let's move to Kate. What are skills and some parting words of wisdom that you would like to give everyone?
So I would like to quote a gentleman that hopefully you all know, Simon Sinek. He's an author and speaker. One of the phrases that's attributed to him, although lots of leaders throughout years have used it: argue like you're right, listen like you're wrong. If you can have the appropriate level of knowledge to really get behind your direction of travel, your thinking, the reason why something that you're getting involved in is appropriate or fit for purpose or better than something else, the how might we conversations that people have, while staying open to alternative views, diverse perspectives and feedback, that growth mindset piece, then you will always have a more constructive dialogue. You will always be encouraging learning and growth. The question to understand, not to belittle or rebut. I think really for me, if you're wanting to foster faster, better decision-making and collaboration, which all of these activities will require, then for me, argue like you're right, listen like you're wrong, and question to understand. And ideally don't use a pause in a conversation to leap in with your perspective. Let it sit for a bit and see what else comes through.
Good. Thank you so much for that. I think that's absolutely great advice for everyone. Last but not least, for Valeria, your thoughts.
Thank you. Kate, to your point, there is a saying, there is always someone who will be able to prove that you are wrong. So no matter what, don't be like, don't stick with your opinion, because your opinion will be wrong for someone else. So that's exactly correct. From my perspective, I think there is no question that the technical skills will be an advantage to you. It's definitely, they will put you apart. However, I think what we start missing out is the human skills, and people should be evolved specifically on a human skills. No matter what, we're still humans. We need to communicate, we need to lead, we need to motivate, we need to engage with people. We all getting the technical skills now, right? Because it's a foundation again, but without the human skills, we won't be able to advance and actually advance in our career further. That's my personal opinion.
Perfect. I liked especially the sentence, you need the technical skills, but we are ultimately still human.
Yeah, we still connect on a personal level.
Correct. So maybe that's a great quote to end our session with today. I would like to thank everyone on the panel for making the time, sharing your insights. For me, this was an absolute honor to moderate. It's very easy with so many different points of view and different levels of questions. Also for the audience, I'm sorry I was unable to kind of go through all the questions because there were so many. So thanks for being so engaging and asking so many different questions. I'm quite sure that a lot of people liked it because I see a lot of hands are going up. But unfortunately, we need to kind of close it right here because, as you know, we have a packed program today. And after this, we will already need to go towards our next session. But before we do that, please note that during all of the sessions, there is a small quiz which gives you the opportunity to win some prizes at the end of tomorrow. So before I introduce our new speakers for today, I'm going to quickly launch the poll. And the poll is as follows: which of the following is a common machine learning technique? And you can now take a vote. Unfortunately, panel members are unable or disqualified from voting. So because we're quite sure you know the answer already. Good, poll is open right now. So take a moment to do that or to fill that in. And then in the meantime, I'm already going to put our next speaker on the screen. And our next speakers that you will see coming up on the screen right now is in track number 1. This is the session that I will be moderating. We will have Christopher Chin, who is going to talk about data storyteller. Christopher Chin is actually the hidden speaker. He has a tremendous amount of experience in delivering public speaking sessions. I recently recorded a podcast with him, and he's going to give a workshop around data storytelling is hard, but let's AI make it easy. In track number 2, we have the managing director of Readapt Data Science Limited, which is Jason Frank, and he's going to talk about strategies for customer-driven data analytics, overcoming organizational challenges, and maximizing customer experience insight. Going to close the poll right now, so in case you haven't voted, please take a moment to do that. And the poll is now closed. And on that note, I would once again like to thank our panelists, Valeria, Kate, and MJ, for sharing your words of wisdom today. It's been an absolute pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
See ya.
See ya.